So, everybody here agrees that there's a crisis on the Mexican-American border right now, and I'm a little bit disappointed in a lot of libertarians for them kind of going along with the mainline idea of what we should do about this crisis. Now, there's two lines of thoughts with this that you've been probably hearing a lot. The first is the Democrats' idea of pretty much just giving everybody amnesty and letting them stay here, and the Republicans who say send them home, build a fence. Now, let's start right there with that we're a country built on, give us your poor, give us your broken, give us your anybody, and we'll turn them into successful Americans. So I think that it's really disingenuous to look at it as these people didn't come here the way that we want them to by going through the U.S. government, especially as libertarians taking this stance, that they didn't come here the way that we want them to come here, so just send them home and build a border. And second of all, building a fence isn't going to do anything. The only types of borders that truly work are natural borders, rivers, mountains, etc. And that's why most of the borders that exist the way that they do. We have an issue on this border because a lot of it doesn't exist that way. You can walk right across. But I want to get down to what the real root causes of this are. So first of all, let's start off with, why are they coming here? Why are Mexicans and people from other countries, but mainly Mexico, why are they coming to the United States? I mean, it's not because they don't love their home country. Mexicans are proud. They're patriotic just like we are. Why are they coming here? A lot of people in the media will tell you they're trying to come after our food stamps programs. They're trying to come here and suck up all the welfare. I don't buy that for a second. Everyone out there knows at least one illegal. I live all the way up in Illinois, so if I know a ton of them, I know everybody else does. The more southern, probably the more that you know. And in my experience, these people aren't coming here to suck up the welfare system. They're not coming here to be criminals. Sure, some are. And if you come here and you're a criminal and you get arrested, absolutely. Send them back. You get them. They don't have documentation. They're causing a problem within our country. Sure, send them home. But for the vast majority of them, they're coming here for two reasons, right? One, they're coming here for safety. They live in a land controlled by drug cartels. It's not safe. They don't want to be there, okay? They want to be there if it's safe. It's their home country, but as it stands right now, there's no future for their children. There's no future for them. There's no future for their family. So they're coming here, number one, out of safety. Number two, for economic reasons. Let me pull up. I have it here in my notes. Where are we? The average Mexican income is $3,086 annually. Now, even if you work for minimum wage in this country, you're at least making, what, 10 grand. They're ranked, according to Google, they're ranked 35th in average income and prosperity. But according to the numbers I found from the ILO and pretty much everywhere else, they're ranked 58th, right around that area. That's lower than China. And we can all sit around and talk about how there's such an issue with slave labor in China, while the average income annually is higher in China than it is in Mexico. So really, these people are coming here. They're coming here for economic reasons and for safety. They want a job and a home where they don't have to worry about drug cartels. I think it's really as simple as that. Now, I'm not denying that there's a problem and that we need to do something about it. I'm not saying amnesty. That's not what I'm saying at all. What I am saying is that while they're here, we should treat them as what they are. We shouldn't treat them as second class. We shouldn't treat them as subhuman. We shouldn't talk about kicking them back out to drug cartel no job land. But there are certain things that come along with that. I don't agree with the matricula, the fake ID card that you can get at the DMV if you're an illegal immigrant, which essentially you can walk in there with a Mexican accent, look Mexican, and they're going to give you a card that says whatever you put on it. This is potentially dangerous because we have a lot of people who might be giving fraudulent names, who might be giving fraudulent date of births. I mean, if I'm 16 and I come across the border illegally, when I get my matricula, you bet your ass I'm going to say I'm 21 to go to the bar. So it's these IDs, which, by the way, retailers are told to take even though they're not legal IDs. They lead to a lot of problems. So I think we should treat them as what it is. You know, if you work at a store and somebody comes up and they don't speak English and you know a little bit of Spanish, don't speak to them in Spanish. They need to learn English. Don't make concessions to them. If you're a police officer and you pull somebody over who's illegal and doesn't have an ID, don't just let them go because it's going to be more paperwork. They have to face the letter of the law like everybody else. When you start making concessions to them, you don't make them second-class citizens. You make them above other citizens, and that creates even more problems and makes them want to come here more. We shouldn't be encouraging it. We shouldn't be saying, hey, come over here, we're going to give you amnesty, we're going to treat you awesome. But when they do get here, we still need to treat them like humans. And I want to get into the reasons. Like I said, the two main reasons that they're coming here: economic prosperity and safety. And so I really want to get into what has caused Mexico to be in the horrible shape that it is. I mean, they're just to our southern border. They're in a similar area. It's a little bit hotter, but if you look historically, higher heat leads to higher prosperity generally. It leads to a country that does better. Uh, so what is it that causes a country so close to us on the same continent to have such different circumstances? And it really comes down to three things that I'm going to explain. Number one is the IMF, which, if you don't know, is the International Monetary Fund. What the IMF does is it gives loans to countries in need, which sounds great, right? A country's in need, they need to rebuild their infrastructure, they have to figure out a way to bring jobs to their country. We give you some money, you can get back on your feet. It's like a loan from your grandpa or your rich uncle when you're falling on hard times, helps you out, helps you pay your mortgage. The problem with the IMF, well, I'll get to the problem in a minute. The second part of this is the war on drugs in the United States. The war on drugs in the United States is pretty much the number one supplier of income for the drug cartels in Mexico. They make their money from us. They make their money from people like me and you who want to smoke a little bit of weed. Majority of their money comes from marijuana being sold in the United States, then cocaine and methamphetamine. And I'll get into that in detail. And the third thing is NAFTA. NAFTA was originally set up to help Mexico, to help them industrialize, to be able to import and export a little bit better so that we could send some of the manufacturing jobs from the United States down there, which people disagreed with at the time, but most people realized that it was bullshit and that those jobs were going to go to China and India, which is exactly what happened. And again, let me remind you, China has a higher median income than Mexico. So those three things: war on drugs, NAFTA, IMF. Those are the things leading to the situation in Mexico. Now, we can solve this problem without building a fence, without isolating an entire culture of people who want to come here for the right reasons, and without even really interacting with the Mexican government whatsoever. Now, the IMF problem, which I'm about to get into, there's not really anything we can do about. It's already happened. I'm going to start off with an article. This is from globalexchange.org, Top 10 Reasons to Oppose the IMF, and they go into the explanation. It's a World Bank created in 1944 at a conference in Bretton Woods, New Hampshire, now based in Washington, D.C. IMF was originally designed to promote international economic cooperation and provide its member countries with short-term loans so that they could trade with other countries, achieve balance of payments. Since the debt crisis of the 1980s, the IMF has assumed the role of bailing out countries during financial crisis caused in large part by currency speculation in the global casino economy, with emergency loan packages tied to certain conditions, often referred to as structural adjustment policies, SAPs. The IMF now acts like a global loan shark, exerting enormous leverage over economies of more than 60 countries. These countries have to follow the IMF's policies to get loans, international assistance, and even debt relief. Thus, the IMF decides how much debtor countries can spend on education, healthcare, environmental protection. The IMF is one of the most powerful institutions on earth, yet few know how it works. And it goes into a few of the reasons. The IMF created a moral system of modern-day colonialism that saps the poor, which basically what they're saying is that they go in, they give these loans to these countries, but then when the loans inevitably can't be paid back because of the same reason that they needed the loan, what they do is they essentially strap you with more loans to pay off the original loans, which now it's only a matter of time until you can't pay off both loans and you're just more and more in debt, giving the IMF more and more control over your country and putting your country more and more into IMF debt slavery. Number two, the IMF serves wealthy countries and Wall Street, which is absolutely true, and it has connections to the Council on Foreign Relations. The IMF imposing a fundamentally flawed development model. The IMF is a secretive institution with no accountability. IMF policies promote corporate welfare, and the IMF hurts the workers. IMF policies hurt women the most. IMF policies hurt the environment. And if you want to find this, just go to globalexchange.org, top 10 reasons to oppose the IMF, and you can get all the details on this. So the IMF, while it sounds great why it exists, really all it does is hurt the people in the countries that it's supposed to be helping. So next I want to go to how much has been given to the Mexican government and in which way. Sorry, I got a little bit of a cough. So first of all, there's three types of loans that have been given to Mexico by the IMF. There's extended fund facility, standby arrangement, and flexible credit lines. Now, in my opinion, they give these things confusing names because they think people will just not understand it and go away. But let's look at what each of these is. Extended Fund Facility, an EFF, when a country faces, and this is from the IMF website, imf.org, by the way. When a country faces serious medium-term balance of payment problems because of structural weaknesses that require time to address, the IMF can assist with the adjustment process under the Extended Fund Facility compared to assistance provided under the standby arrangement. Assistance under the extended arrangement features longer program engagement to help countries implement medium-term structural reforms and a longer repayment period. So this is essentially when you can't pay your mortgage, so you just go to only paying the interest. And then you're not really paying it off, but you're existing in the meantime. The next type is the standby arrangement. In economic crisis, countries often need financing to help them overcome their balance of payments problems so they can't pay the debt that they already have. Since its creation in June of 1952, the IMF standby arrangement has been used time and time again by member countries. It is the IMF, which gives you an idea of what's going on here, which gives the IMF's workhorse lending instrument for emerging and advanced market countries. Rates are non-consensual, although they are almost always lower than that countries would pay to raise financing from private markets. Blah, blah, blah. So pretty much the same thing. And then flexible credit line. The flexible credit line was designed to meet the demand of crisis prevention and crisis mitigation lending for countries with very strong policy frameworks and track records of economic performance, which that's questionable. The instrument was created as part of the process reforming the IMF, lends money to countries that find themselves in a cash crunch with the idea of tailoring its lending instruments to the diverse needs of circumstances of the member countries. So pretty much countries are broke. This is a way for the IMF to get them into a loan. And like we said, the history of the IMF, which if you're just tuning in, the IMF is the International Monetary Fund. The history of the IMF shows that anybody who starts taking money from the IMF essentially becomes a debt slave. So for the history of Mexico, let's see. Amounts agreed to for loans. The first one on the IMF website in 1985 for a little over, or just under $3.5 million. 1986 for $1.4 million. 1989 and an extended fund facility for $3.7 million. Standby agreement in 1995 of $12 million. Another standby agreement in 1999 of just over $3 million, a flexible credit line in 2009, which was $31 million, and a flexible credit line again in 2012 or 2010 for $31.5 million. And this is money that Mexico isn't going to be able to pay back. They've already had issues. You can look into the history of Mexico and the IFM. They're pretty much constantly defaulting. The basic way to put it is Mexico is constantly defaulting on their IMF debt. And once they default on it, the IMF comes in and says, here's another loan so that you can make the payments, only putting them further and further in debt. Like I said, the average median income in Mexico is $3,086 a year, ranked 58th by the ILO. That's lower than China. So the country's in debt, and there's no jobs. So that gives you an idea of what I'm talking about when I say that the IMF is very much responsible for the debt crisis and the economic problems within Mexico. Now, the next part that I was talking about is the war on drugs in the United States. The war on drugs in the United States flat out funds the drug cartels that are making Mexico unsafe for the people who live there. So on top of not having any jobs and making very little money if you do, the drug cartels are pretty much ruling all the towns down there. And there is direct correlation between the American war on drugs and Mexican drug cartels. Mexican drug cartels make between 19 and 29 billion dollars annually just from U.S. drug sales, and that's pretty much their cash crop. They're making their money off of us, while at the same time, the amount of money spent annually in the U.S. on the war on drugs is more than $51 billion. So not only are we paying $51 billion for this war on drugs, but at the same time, American people are buying the drugs from people in another country, which pulls another $19 to $29 billion out of our economy. Now, one, if we stop the war on drugs, that would be $51+ billion that we wouldn't have to steal from the American people in the form of taxes, because that wouldn't exist. I'm not saying that they would stop stealing that money, but at least it could go maybe somewhere a little bit better. And another $19 to $29 billion that could be brought into our economy. Majority of that could be used as tax revenue. Look at what's going on in Colorado and Washington. In the first day of legalization of marijuana in Colorado, they raised over $1 million in tax revenue in one day, and that's just tax revenue. That's not profits for the businesses. $1 million in one day from legalization of just marijuana. And that is Mexico's main profit center is marijuana, cocaine, and then methamphetamine, but marijuana by a long shot is where they're making their money. So by legalizing marijuana, we could not only improve our own economy drastically, but we could make Mexico safer. So really, what's the question here? And on top of that, I'm sure we all remember Fast and Furious a few years ago, where the ATF, Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms, was actually caught giving guns to the drug cartels. So the drug cartels that exist by our creation because of our war on drugs, now we're giving them guns. And if you don't understand what I'm saying when I say that we created the drug cartels, look at prohibition of alcohol in the United States. Everybody knows, it's common knowledge, that the prohibition of alcohol created the mafia, because then they were able to supply it to the American people who still desired the product. So when we made alcohol legal again in this country, what happened? We don't really have mafias anymore. They all dried up. So if we were to legalize marijuana, the same thing would happen in Mexico. The drug cartels would dry up. Now, the last thing is NAFTA. NAFTA was originally offered to the American people as, hey, we'll be able to help out Mexico. We'll send manufacturing jobs down there, which a lot of people didn't like, but we sent them to China and India anyways. So, but the idea was that, yes, it would take a few jobs from American people, but it would help out the Mexican economy. So most people, experts at the time, knew that this wasn't the case, knew it wasn't true from the get-go, and that those jobs would go to China and India, as they did. But this, from the Center for Economic Policy Research, finds that after 20 years after the North American Free Trade Agreement took effect, Mexico's economic performance has been dismal compared to the rest of the region. The report Did NAFTA Help Mexico, which you can look up, an assessment after 20 years, examines official data sources to track Mexico's progress under NAFTA and finds slow growth, stagnant wages, and nothing to show in the way of poverty reduction. And then at the end there's a quote, "Of course it's possible that Mexico could have done even worse without NAFTA, but looking at the data, it's tough to see how." And that's the Center for Economic Policy Research's co-director and lead author of the report, Mark Weisbrot. Uh, so if we were to either repeal NAFTA, which wouldn't really have any effect, it seems like, or what I've said as a possible answer to this problem is to increase import tariffs on China and India. And that's something that is allowed to the federal government by the Constitution. It's one of the few things that they're allowed to do is regulate import tariffs. If we were to regulate import tariffs, raise the tariffs on China and India, that would force these crony capitalist corporations that are literally building our iPhones in slave sweatshops in China, it would force them to send those jobs somewhere closer to home, either bring them back to the United States or more likely send them to Mexico. And with it being that close to home, it would be a lot harder for them to get away with human rights violations. So it would make us feel better because we would know that our iPhones aren't being made in slave sweatshops. It would help out the Mexican economy. And if we did all these things that I just prescribed, okay, if we legalized marijuana, and I've been saying this so much, but nobody seems to listen, if we legalized marijuana, and if we raised import tariffs on China and India, or let's just say overseas production in general by U.S. corporations, we could send the jobs back to Mexico and we could eliminate the drug cartels. Now, what did we say at the beginning of this video / live broadcast are the reasons that Mexicans want to come to the United States? Because Mexico isn't safe and there's no jobs. If we did these two simple things, it would help our economy. Our economy would do better. Mexico's economy would do better. Mexico would become safer, and we wouldn't need to build a fence or send them home because these people love their country. They don't want to be here because they hate Mexico. They want to be here because Mexico isn't safe and there's no jobs. Building a fence isn't going to do anything. They're going to figure out a way over it or they're going to figure out a way under it. If they want to come here, they're going to come here. It's going to happen. This is the answer. This is how we do it. We don't have to create a race conflict between us and people of Hispanic descent, Hispanic people coming from Mexico. We can solve this without even talking to the Mexican government. We don't even need to interact with them. Everybody wins. So that's my answer to how we solve this border crisis, and solve it by solving the initial problems in Mexico that are creating the desire for people to come over here without interaction with Mexico, and at the same time improving our own economy. If anybody disagrees with me, if you have any comments, I hope that you leave them in the comment line of this video on YouTube. Thank you for watching. Check out my website. Run it with a few other guys, themediaspeaks.com. The Media Speaks .com is our YouTube channel, at The Media Speaks on Twitter, The Media Speaks on Facebook. Just type in The Media Speaks, and if you don't find us, well, you're probably retarded. So please leave your comments. I'm interested to see what other people feel about this. Thanks.